Shema Chavarim, and hear us well, for now is the story of Purim to tell. It took place in Shushan so long, long ago. Now off to Persia we will all go.
In this beautiful kingdom ruled a king with no brain who thought such a thing. He spent all his days and his nights having fun, parading his wealth in the warm Persian sun.
A queen named Vashti was his loyal wife. She promised to love him all of her life. She promised, that is, until he did ask, for her to perform an unthinkable task.
At this grandest of parties the king did command Queen Vashti to dance for royal men of the land. I'm not your servant, and dance I will not. Vashti refused the king's sexiest plot.
For Vashti, you see, was not known as a fibber. She was, in fact, history's first woman libber. Vashti was banished, away she did go. Where did she go? That we do not know.
In this fair kingdom lived also the Jews, who could not practice the religion they choose. No Torah, no challah, no matzah bowl soup, for the villain named Haman had started a coup. Bow down for me, cruel Haman did say. For I'm an important man of the day. I'm the king's right-hand man. I rule all that I see. If you don't bow down now, you will cease to be.
Meanwhile, back at the palace grand, an announcement went throughout the land. A new queen to be chosen in an unusual way, in a beauty contest held the very next day.
All the maidens of the land were forced to appear, from near to far, from far to from near. One such maiden had brains and had grace. Esther was her name, such a pretty face.
Encouraged by her uncle, or was it cousin, Mordecai, I beg you, dear Esther, this you must try. With brains and your beauty, he would choose. Go, 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 comb your hair, wear nice shoes.
Besides that, my dear, with your grace and your charm, you will blow them away. You will be King Ahasuerus's arm. Unsure of herself, but willing to go because she loved her uncle so, she entered the contest but said, Uncle dear, promise me that you'll always stand near.
The contest was held, they came one and all, and Esther, of course, was the queen of the ball. Though Ahasuerus chose her, and she was now queen, there was one rotten rule she had not foreseen.
Under penalty of death, she had to obey the following rule in an unbaying way. Her new husband commanded she could only see him when he chose to see her on his whim.
So now, back to Haman. Where am I? That cruel, crusty fellow, at the top of his lungs he continued to bellow. Bow down, now I command, or great harm will come to you in this land. Land.
Mordecai, of course, refused to obey. I bowed down only for God to my last dying day. Haman's face turned red with anger and hate. I'll get you, my pretty, if it's the last breath I take.
Mordecai turned his back, and others did follow. As for Haman, well, his pride he had to swallow. That Jew, Mordecai, has ruined my heinous plot. Because of this affront, I will have to draw lots.
The straw that I pick, the one that comes nigh, is the day that the Jews of Persia shall die.
Into his three-cornered hat he did cast all of the dates, the future, the past. The lot that he picked was the 13th of Adar.
Make ready the gallows. Adar is not far.
Right after Haman. He did pester when Mordecai do see Queen Esther. At the palace gate 2 guards he did approach, plotting to kill King Ahasuerus.
Brave Mordi protected his king and his land by revealing the plot in the palace grand. His loyalty and his brains gave him the upper hand.
The king in his chamber that evening did read of Mordecai's loyalty in the book of good deeds. With the smallest of brains the king thinked, and he thinked, who is this Mordecai who saved me from the brink? Who is this man who foiled the God's plan? I must reward him. Send for Haman.
A question to Haman. Ahasuerus did pose.
How should I honor a man who has been on his toes, who has saved my kingdom through heroic deeds, without a single thought to his own needs?
Haman! Thinking this hero was he, for saving the kingdom from the Jews for the king. Pompously swelled with excitement he agreed. He knew the king would his words heed.
I think, my dear king, no reward is too great. Give him diamonds and jewels and a house by the lake, fabulous clothing and all of the best. Let him ride the king's horse on your next birthday fest.
Make it so, dear Haman. Loyal right-hand man, bring forth Mordecai the Jew. This is my command. Instruct all the tailors, my jewelers, my builders, to spare no shekels, no rubles, no guilders. Call all the king's horses and all the king's men to honor this Jew again and again.
Haman, astounded, speechless at best, felt his anger spread from his feet to his chest. Could it be this man who refused to bow down must now be honored all through the town?
Seizing that moment, the opportunity here, Mordecai to Esther did appear, using his wits and oh so clever brain. Mordi made history, now Esther has fame.
Oh, you must risk your life and go to the king and tell him about this heinous thing that Haman is planning. The Jews will all die. You must go, brave Esther. This you must try.
But cousin or uncle, she said, trembling with fear, without his permission I cannot go near. It could be my life, I'm so afraid. But Mordi replied, you can do this, babe.
Use your brains and your charm and your prettiest skirt. And you, Shaina Purim, what could that hurt?
So Esther swallowed her fear, and she calmed her nerves. She went after this task with vim and with verve.
A party given that very same night, she walked into the banquet, trembling with fright. Although shocked to see her, the king did beckon. I'll see her. It's fine, I reckon.
Dear husband, she said, I've gotten some news, so horrible, that I did choose to come unsummoned to be by your side. You must listen to me. After all, I'm your bride.
Risking her life, Esther told him the story of Haman's dastardly plan. Evil and hoary. Esther, still trembling, explained to her mate, My lord, at the risk of sealing my fate, I must tell you something that to you may be news. Someone is planning to kill all the Jews.
This includes Mordecai and all of his kin. And in this category, you must put me in. For you see, I'm Jewish, but so loyal to you. Please don't hurt my people. please, please don't hurt the Jew.
I fear, my dear husband, unless you act with your heart, I too will die on the 13th of Adar.
Thinking the thoughts a king would sure think, that his loyal wife deserve a mink. He called for his henchman, his number 2, to question again what should he do in order to save his wife and her kin. Haman, of course, slunk right in.
Esther, dear Esther, tell Haman your fear. Don't be afraid. Tell him, my dear. Okay, here goes nothing, said Esther inside. She looked straight at Haman and summoned her pride. You wicked, wicked man, how dare you pretend that you are loyal to my king to the end?
You who did plot to destroy all the Jews also will kill me, whom the king did choose. For I too am Jewish, you hateful old cot. Turn around, said the king. I'll give you the boot.
I sentence you now to the gallows you build. Not a single drop of Jewish blood shall be spilt. Pack up your belongings, but don't go far. On the gallows you'll be swinging on the 13th of Adar.
The moral of the story, Chavarim, you now know. It's to honor God and all people wherever you go, to stand up and speak out for all that is right. And to you, Chag Sameach, Laila Tov, and good night.
Thank you.
So, please don't go. So, welcome actually to everyone also on YouTube. I hope you enjoy this evening with us. We will now do what is right to do by having a short evening service, and then we will have a little bit more serious reading of the Megillah. So if you have a prayer book in front of you, please join Chaim and me with a service. And it is nice and proper, but not too long, I promise. And if you can go, please, or start on page 66. Then we have the Baruch Hu. But as always, and I will say a little bit more about it in between, Purim is a joyful festival, but it's also a little bit serious. And so I hope we will try to find the right balance. So on page 66 for the Baruch Hu, and we will just rise for it, if you are able to, in your costumes.
In your costume.
והוא רחום יכפר עוון ולא ישחית והרבה להשיב אפו ולא יעיר כל חמתו ברכו את אדוני המבורך
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. Please be seated.
Blessed are you, our living God, sovereign of the universe, whose word brings on the evening twilight, who opens the gates of dawn with wisdom, and who foresight makes times pass and seasons change. Your plan sets the stars in their courses in the sky, creating day and night, turning light into darkness and darkness into light. You make the day fade away and bring on the night, separating day and night. You are the ruler of the hosts of heaven. Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'arif arabim.
Ahavat olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, Hukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadeta, Otanu limadeta, Al kein Adonai בליבנו בשוכבנו ובקומנו נשיח בחוקיך ודברי תורתך ומצוותיך לעולם ועד כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נגי יומם בלילה נגי יומם בלילה ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב את עמו ישראל אוהב את עמו ישראל 68 שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. And we go to page 70. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אמת ואמונה כל זאת וקיים עלינו כי הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואין זולתו ואנחנו ישראל עמו העושה גדולות עד אין חקר ונפלאות עד אין מספר וראו בניו גבורתו שברו והודו לשמו ומלכותו ורצון קיבלו עליהם משה ומרים ובני ישראל לך אנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדע בקודש נורא תהילות עושה פלא מלכותך אדוני אלוהינו ראו בניך על הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגואלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל
אמן.
השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום לשלום והעמידנו מלכנו לחיים ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך Amen. And we come to the Amidah and we are on page 74 and we will do a combination of communal Amidah and giving also everyone a little space in between. So we will begin together on page 74 with the first three blessings, and then we will have time for everyone to read in their own intermediate blessings, and then we will conclude together again on page 83.
Adonai sefatai tiftahu fi yagi tehilatecha Adonai sefatai tiftahu fi yagi tehilatecha Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu ve'Elohei imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Sarah Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, קונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואמהות, ומביא גואל לפני בניהם למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם פוקד שרה.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה מטימת הרב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם.
מקל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, צומח נופלים ברופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומדומה לך, מלך ממיד ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה.
ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים,
ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים.
Bottom of page 76.
אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום הללוכה סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Now we have time for our private reading, and we will then come back together on page 83.
Our living God, be pleased with your people Israel and listen to their prayers. In your great mercy delight in us, so that your presence may rest upon Zion. Our eyes look forward to your return to Zion in mercy. Baruch atah Adonai, המחזיר שכינתו לציון.
מודים אנחנו לך, שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו לעולם ועד. צורנו צור חיינו ומגן ישענו, אתה הוא. לדור ודור נודה לך ונספר תהילתך, על חיינו המסורים בידיך, ועל נשמותינו הפוקדות לך, ועל ניסיך שבכל יום עמנו, ועל נפלאותיך וטובותיך, שבכל עת ערב ובוקר וצהריים. הטוב כי לא חלו רחמך, המרחם כי לא תמו חסדיך, כי מעולם קיווינו לך. And now we have the special insert for Purim, and if you want you can turn to page 384, but leave your finger on page 84 as well. And there it says, Al Hanisim. We thank you for all the wonders, the victories, and the marvelous and consoling deeds you performed for our ancestors in those days at this season. In the days of Mordechai and Esther, in Shushan, the capital, when the wicked Haman rose up against them, he sought to destroy, kill, and exterminate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, on one day, and plunder their possessions. That is the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then you, in your great mercy, upset his plans and overthrew his design, and made his acts recoil upon his own head. And you performed a wonder and a marvel for them. Therefore we thank your great name. And we're back on page 85.
And for all these things, may your name, our sovereign, be blessed, exalted and honored forever and ever. May every living being thank you. May they praise and bless your great name in truth, for you are the God who saves and helps us. Blessed are you, God, known as goodness, whom it is right to praise.
And we turn the page to 86. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav
Yisrael Amcha,
Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. V'tov beinecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael b'chol et u'b'chol sha'a b'shlomecha. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam.
Baruch atah Adonai, המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. הוא יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. הוא יעשה שלום, הוא יעשה שלום, Shalom Aleinu Al Kol Yisrael. Ve'emru
Amen.
And we turn to page 310 for the Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים, ונתן לנו את תורתו. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגוף מרומים. הוא אלוהינו ואין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו. וידעת היום והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
And as Purim is a festival which marks the victorious survival of our people, we also remember that in history not every generation was as lucky as the people of the Persian Empire, who were saved by the courage of Esther and the smart brain, as we heard before, of Mordechai, but unfortunately had not this intervention and this support. And so when we recite tonight Kaddish, we think of all those who perished in the Shoah and in the many pogroms and other attacks on the Jewish people, but we also think of those righteous people who stand with the Jewish people and protected them and gave also their life in supporting and standing with us. Please join in, page 316. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shomer rabba, ve'alma divrach cheroteh ve'amlich malchoteh, v'chai echon u'v'yom echon, u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'emru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevorach le'alam u'lalmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithaдар v'yithaleh v'yithalal shmei dekudisha v'rechu. Le'ela min kol bichata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, ti'ameran be'alema v'imru amen. Yehei shlam ha'rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu, v'kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'momav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Thank you. Please be seated. That was the part of our daily obligation to have our evening service. And now we turn to the mitzvah that we all need to fulfill on this special festival evening, and that is to hear the Megillah. So the obligation, the commandment is that we hear the reading of the Megillah. So, and in order that you can fulfill this mitzvah, you need someone who is reading for you the Megillah. And thankfully, we have a wonderful congregation, and so we have several readers this evening who will read, volunteers, congregants, wonderful people who are mitzvah helpers and help us so that we can fulfill the mitzvah chapter by chapter. And so we just begin with reading the blessing together, which is on page 385. So that is our blessing for today, and it includes also the Shehichiyanu. So one more thing where we also can with joy join in, and then we will have the opening verses, and Stella will then call people who will read for us chapter by chapter. So the first blessing, page 385. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivonu al mikra Megillah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa nisim lavoteinu ve'imotenu bayamim hahem ubazman hazeh. And the Shehichiyanu, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Shehichiyanu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. Now I need my Megillah. And yeah, I hope you have. Yeah!
Still blue instead.
Yes. Chapter 1. Vayhi bimei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh hamelech mehodu ve'at Kush, sheva v'ezrim u'mea medina, bishnat shalosh lemalko, asa mishteh lechol zerav ve'avadav, gam vashti hamalka asita mishteh nasim, Beit HaMalchut asher lamelech Achashverosh bayom hashvi'i ketov lef hamelech bayahin amma lehavi et Vashti hamalka livnei hamelech beketer malchut leharot ha'amim והשרים את יפה כי טובה מראה ההיא.
And it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. This is Ahasuerus who reigned from Hodu to Cush over 127 provinces. In the 3rd year of his reign, he made a banquet for all his princes and his servants. Also, Vashti the queen made a banquet for the women in the royal palace, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded to bring Vashti the queen before the king, wearing nothing but the royal crown, to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was beautiful to look on. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command by his eunuchs, and the king was very angry, and his anger burned in him. And the king said to the wise men, "What shall we do to the queen Vashti according to law, because she has not performed the command of the king Ahasuerus by the eunuchs?" And Memucan answered in the presence of the king and the princes, "For this deed of the queen shall be known to all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes, when it shall be reported that the king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought to his presence, but she came not. If it please the king, let a royal command be issued by him, and let it be written among the laws that Vashti is to come no more to the presence of King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she."
After these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus was appeased, and let the king appoint officials in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the young virgins of good presence to Shushan, the capital, to the harem. And let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. There was a Jewish man in Shushan, the capital, and his name was Mordecai. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter. So it came to pass that Esther was brought to the king's palace to the custody of Hegai, guardian of the women. Esther had not declared her people nor her country, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not tell. Now when the turn of Esther came, Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus to his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tevet, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the other women, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, 2 of the king's eunuchs, Bigtan and Teresh, of those who guarded the door, were angry and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the matter was known to Mordecai, who told it to Esther the queen, and Esther informed the king of it in Mordecai's name. And when inquiries were made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore they were both hanged on a tree. And it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king.
After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman and advanced him, and all the king's servants who were in the king's gate bowed him and did obeisance to Haman. For the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow, nor did him obeisance. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow, nor did him obeisance, then was Haman full of wrath. And Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai. And Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom, and their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore, it is not for the king's profit to tolerate them. If it please the king, let it be decreed that they may be destroyed." And the king said to Haman, "The silver is given to you, the people also, so do with them as it seems good to you." Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded, to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar.
And Mordecai perceived all that was done. Mordecai tore his clothes and put on a sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry. So Esther's maids and his eunuchs came and told her. Then was the queen exceedingly distressed. Then called Esther for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, whom he had appointed to attend on her, and gave him a command to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. And Hathach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a command for Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that whoever, whether man or woman, shall come to the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is a law to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come to the king these 30 days. And they told Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, "Think not yourself that in the king's palace you shall escape any more than the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, then shall relief and deliverance arise from the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house shall be destroyed. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. "Go, gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me. Neither eat or drink 3 days, day or night. I also and my girls will fast likewise, and so will I go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him.
Have you never seen a banana in glasses, people? Come on. And it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal dress and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, opposite the king's palace, and the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal palace, opposite the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she found favour in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then the king said to her, "What do you wish, Queen Esther? And what is your request? It shall be given to you, even to half of the kingdom." And Esther answered, "If it seems good to the king, let the king and Haman come this day to the banquet that I have prepared for him." Then the king said, "Make Haman hurry so that he may do as Esther has said." So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said to Esther at the banquet of wine, "What is your petition? And it shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to half the kingdom it shall be granted." Then answered Esther and said, "My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to grant my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king has said." Then went Haman out that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he did not stand nor stir for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Hooray! And Haman said, and Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king to the banquet that she had prepared but myself, and tomorrow I am also invited to her with the king. Yet all this avails me nothing, for as long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. And Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends said to him, "Let a gallows be made 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak to the king that Mordecai may be hanged on it, and then go in cheerfully with the king to the banquet." And this thing pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made.
What is the dish you're cooking to us?
Haman. Boo. Tushen. On that night the king could not sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of the records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigtan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the king said, "What honor and dignity has been done to Mordecai for this?" Then said the king's servants who ministered to him, "Nothing was done for him." And the king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had come into the outward court of the king's palace to speak to the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servant said to him, "Behold, Haman stands in the court." And the king said, "Let him come in." So Haman came in, and the king said to him, "What shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor?" Now Haman thought in his heart, "To whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself?" And Haman answered the king, "For the man whom the king delights to honor, let the royal clothing be brought which the king wears, and the horse that the king rides upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this clothing and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man with it, whom the king delights to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, 'Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor.' Then the king said to Haman, 'Hurry and take the clothing and the horse, as you have said, and do so to Mordecai, the Jew who sits at the king's gate, let nothing fail of all that you have spoken. Then took Haman the clothing and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honour. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house mourning, and having his head covered. And Haman told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. And while they were still talking with him, came the king's eunuchs and hurried to bring Haman to the banquet that Esther had prepared.
Thank you.
Again.
So the king and Haman came to feast with Esther the queen. And the king said again to Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, What is your petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted of you. And what is your request? And it shall be fulfilled, even to the half of the kingdom.
Then Esther, the queen, answered and said, If I found favour in your sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people to be destroyed, to be slain, and to be annihilated. But if we had been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept my silence, since the affliction would not have equalled the king's damage.
And the king Ahasuerus answered and said to Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he, that does presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and queen.
And Harbona, one of the eunuchs, said before the king, Behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, stands in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Woo! Then was the king's wrath pacified.
And Esther spoke once more before the king and fell down at his feet and pleaded with tears to avert the evil design of Haman, the Agagite, and his plot that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held out the golden scepter towards Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king. Then the king Ahasuerus said to Esther the queen and to Mordecai the Jew, Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he would lay his hand upon the Jews. And you write about the Jews as you please, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the decrees which are decreed in the king's name, and sealed with the king's ring, no man can revoke. By these the king authorized the Jews who were in every city to gather themselves together, and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to annihilate any armed force of any people or province that might attack them, infants and women, and to plunder their goods. On one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal clothes of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. And in every province and in every city, wherever the king's command and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them.
And in the 12th month, that is, the month of Adar, on the 13th day, the Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, to lay hand on such as sought their hurt. And no man could withstand them, for their fear fell upon all the people. And the king said to Esther the queen, "The Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan, the capital. And the 10 sons of Haman, what they have done in the rest of the king's provinces. Now, what is your petition, and it shall be granted to you? Or what is your request further, and it shall be done?" And then said Esther, "If it pleases the king, let it be granted to the Jews who are in Shushan to do tomorrow as according to this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows." And Mordecai wrote these things and sent the letters to all the Jews that were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, to establish among them that this should be kept on the 14th day of the month of Adar and on the 15th day of the same yearly, like the days when the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month from which they was turned to them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning to a holiday, that there should be among them days of feasting and joy, and sending the portions one to another, and gifts to the poor.
מלך אחשוורוש מס על הארץ ואיי הים וכל מעשה תקפו גבורתו ופרשת גדולת מרדכי אשר גידלו המלך הלא הם כתובים על ספר דברי הימים למלכי מדי ופרס כי מרדכי היהודי משנה למלך אחשוורוש והגדול ליהודים ורצוי לרוב אחיו דורש טוב לעמו ודובר שלום לכל זרעו. And the final blessing is on page 385. And 385. Baruch atah Adonai, blessed are you, our living God, sovereign of the universe, who heard our plea and judged our cause. You are the one who has always saved us, our hope in every generation. May those who trust in you never be ashamed or humiliated. Blessed are you, God, the power that saves us. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el ha'moshiach. Amen. And this concludes our reading. And before we then continue with our celebration here, I want to just say thank you to everyone who joined us on YouTube. It was unannounced, and still we had a very nice attendance. Thank you also for your comments on YouTube, and I hope to see you all again on Friday. And thank you for everyone here, and may you enjoy this festival. As I mentioned, it is a festival that we should take lightly, but also with one or the other serious thought. thought, especially these days when, there is trouble, so much trouble in the world, and some of the trouble is also caused by our brothers and sisters in Israel. And while everyone who tries to come close to us and to annihilate us or to take our presence into questions deserves that we fight back if necessary, but this is never the reason that we actually are the ones who cause us in retribution something that is not just. And we always should think about that. Our Torah teaches us that we should always pursue justice, and when we are turning a blind eye to justice, then we are not better than those who try to kill us. This was the serious note, and once again, Chag Sameach, Purim Sameach, and see you everyone, if not this Shabbat, latest in 1 month for Pesach. Purim Sameach.
Purim Sameach.
One thing, yes.